Now let's turn our attention to, well, many different kinds of migration. Let's talk to Gavin Rice. He's the head of political economy at Onward. A very, very good afternoon to you.
Hi, Julia. Good to be with you again.
Thank you very much for joining us. Look, let's talk about legal migration as well as illegal migration. We have got some extraordinary figures out from the Office for National Statistics yesterday, and we mentioned them very briefly on the show yesterday, showing we have seen a second bumper year, record year of mass increase in our population, almost entirely down to immigration. Talk us through those figures.
Well, what we've seen is the population rise at a record level for the second year in a row. And the figures that were reported this morning were that the population went up by 700,000 in the year to June last year. These are absolutely unprecedented figures. But I actually think to understand just how unprecedented they are, you actually need to look at the broad sweep of the history of immigration to this country to realize just how unusual they are. So if you look at immigration prior to 1997, in the 24 years before that, when Tony Blair came to power, net migration was only 18,000. Subsequently...
on a year?
No, the total. Whereas if you look at what happened...
The total number of people who came into this country over the people who left, the net migration to this country for 24 years in the period up to 1997 when Blair was elected was just 18,000 people.
Precisely, because we only really get significant net migration after the EU accession states come along and the expansion of the EU eastwards under Tony Blair. So the total amount of net migration in the 24 years after 1997 is over 5 million. And then just from 2021 to now, so only 4 years, it's 3.4 million in what increasingly is being called the Boris wave, because it's the new migration rules active from 2021 onwards. So it's not just the annual figure, it's the scale of sweep up.
I mean, exponential is a word that does need to be used. We often overuse that word. And this was the thing, because again and again, 2010, 2015, 2017, 2019, and again, 2024, voters have said very clearly, again and again, they would like immigration, legal immigration, to be cut. Boris Johnson clearly got the message in 2016 with the Brexit vote, and we weren't saying what we'd not like is more Polish people, but what we'd like is the whole of Pakistan and Nigeria to turn up on our shores. I mean, it was quite bizarre and indeed perverse, that Boris wave, where they basically handed out, as far as I can tell, a visa to pretty much anyone who wanted to come to the country, most of whom actually were low-paid, low-skilled migrants.
Or indeed not working at all. So the idea was to introduce a more selective, more controlled immigration system focused on high skills.
Points-based system that Australia had. Yeah, you're an engineer, we need engineers, come on in.
Right, exactly. But first of all, the salary threshold set for the skilled worker visa was extremely low at first, only 26,000, which is below the average salary and not enough to be a net contributor over a lifetime. And secondly, migrants arriving since 2021 on the skilled worker route are only 5% of the total. So the vast majority of people coming under the migration rules we've had since 2021 are actually not here for the purposes of work
or they're the spouses or dependents, and by definition not working, not contributing, and the vast majority of those skilled migrants actually often aren't, not vast, but a large number are not actually earning above average incomes, and therefore they're not net contributors, because you have to be earning pretty much well above average income in this country to be a net contributor tax-wise. It is mind-blowing, isn't it? Look, but at least those are the people who've gone through the right system. They've applied, they've been accepted. All credit to them if they want to make a new life in another country and improve their lives and their families' lives. More fool our authorities for thinking that they're going to be a benefit to the British people. But then you've got the illegal migration. We've seen yet, what was it, 900 people? I've lost track. 900 this day, 400 that day, coming across on the boats from Calais. Border Force spending the time, as far as I can tell, just ferrying people to this country. And we've also got more and more concern concern about illegal migrants and where they go. We've had the concern, in Epping, at the Bell Hotel, and it's happened across the country, Bournemouth, Norwich and elsewhere, where local people have been protesting for weeks now about people being housed in hotels. We had Isabel Oakshott, international editor, her revelation of a 4-star hotel where people are living in 4-poster beds and getting 3 lovely meals a day and cleaners and goodness knows what, and getting freebies from the local council. And people are up in arms about that. Latest, we've got thousands of people who pack the streets of Waterlooville. They're just north of Portsmouth, down in Hampshire, and they've had anti-migrant protests over a plan by the Home Office, without the permission or the agreement of the council, to move asylum seekers into new flats, 250 grand purchase flat, which are desperately needed by local people. What do you make of the government's policy in this? Because this is a continuation of what happened under the Tories, and people say we don't want them in hotels, and then they move them into normal accommodation, but that is in competition with local people. The reality is people don't want these people in the country at all.
Yeah, well, I think this is a classic example of the government not really running the government. So they say that they have a policy, which is to stop the boats and smash the gangs, but these are just languages that are used in Parliament or in press releases. The truth is the UK government actually isn't in charge of this at all. It would be extremely easy to stop the boats crossing the channel, where for the Navy and for special forces and so on. You simply turn them around, you take them to a small island that the UK owns or whatever it is, but you do not allow them to come on shore. The problem is any such move by the government would immediately be struck down by the courts under the Human Rights Act. And particularly under our obligations under the European Convention on Human Rights. So the idea that we can just solve this problem on our own, regardless of the international legal structures that we're still in, is simply for the birds, and it's deeply dishonest.
And of course, a lot of people say we just need to leave the European Court of Human Rights and that will solve it, because we've got activist judges and we've got an activist attorney general and a prime minister who agree with them on a lot of these issues. Do you think the British public are going to sort of keep putting up with this? Because I've talked a lot this week about how I think we're reaching a tipping point. The fact that people are actually on the streets, and I think it's really important that those protests stay peaceful. In fact, trouble seems to be caused by the police bussing in, the pro-refugee protesters from other areas who are apparently quite happy to have refugees living, in another person's area. But or not, they're economic migrants, let's call them what they are. But do you think that we are reaching a tipping point when the government of whichever hue it is can no longer just pat us on the head and go, there, it's all fine, and then call us racist, and that's just not going to fly anymore?
I think that's right. And this is a case, in my estimation, where common sense has actually been ahead of elite media opinion and even of official statistics.
Yeah.
I mean, people know that many of the people coming over here are men, not women and children, in their 20s, basically working in the illegal market. I mean, you'll see hotels for asylum seekers with Deliveroo and Uber Eats bags out the back, because obviously they're working in those kind of franchise operations. It's clearly being used as a route to get into the UK. I think people have known that in their heart of hearts for a long time. And I think now the media, and also the political class, late as ever, have finally kind of arrived at that point. I think people are rightly sick and tired of this, and I think something is going to have to be done. My concern is that I just know that every bone in Keir Starmer and Lord Hermer's body is we are going to prioritise our understanding of international law over the democratic priorities of British voters, because that's just the kind of people that they are. And I'm actually quite worried about when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object here.
That is a very, very good point. But I think the blame will be on the politicians for failing to do the will of the people, which they've expressly been told to do again and again and again in every election. I so appreciate you joining us.